And welcome back to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. Thanks for joining us today. Shayne, we are 3-0. Pittsburgh Steelers are starting undefeated,
Yeah.
1 of 5 undefeated teams right now. So can't complain about the results that we've seen
Nope.
so far. Obviously, there's room for improvement. Lots of talk about Justin Fields and the performance that we've
Yeah.
seen, the progression we've seen over the first 3 weeks. We're going to spend a good deal of time talking about Fields today. I know that Josh covered him a lot on Monday as well. So if you missed Monday's live show with Josh Yours, please check that out. He did an amazing
Yeah.
job breaking down some Justin Fields tape there. We want to, though, dive into who is he now? How good has the performance been in compared to the rest of the league? And what could he be for the future of this team potentially? We're going to share our thoughts there. We're going to start today, though, with talking about some of the big injuries that happened in this game. Obviously, Steelers are coming off this win from the Chargers in Week 3. It was a game that we thought both of us thought it would be a close contest. Obviously, Shayne, it helped that Justin Herbert missed part of the second half there.
Yeah.
But things went as well as you could have expected. I think the Chargers came into this game being the best rushing offense in the league, averaging J.K. Dobbins was averaging 9.9 yards per carry in his first 2 contests. Yours held him to 2.9, 3.1 as a team. They executed Mike Tomlin brand of football to get this win.
Yeah, and this is what they needed to do, right? Because we've seen through the first 2 games prior to this game, like this team, regardless of how fans, you and I, anyone else feels about it, they want to win a certain way. It's not just about winning, although that is ultimately what matters for Tomlin. He still wants to do it in a certain fashion, right? He wants to impose his will and his team's will upon the other opponent. And he certainly did that in this game, especially in the second half, where they netted -5 yards, I believe is what it ended up being in the second half. Took a ton of sacks. Obviously, Herbert getting banged up, helps with that. But this defense in particular, just when you give them any sort of lead, when you give them any sort of, quarterback to hunts whenever they have to go for it on 3rd and longs and get into those tough situations, it's just really hard for any unit in the league to block this team. I mean, the Chargers came in with one of the better pass blocking duos in the league at tackle, and it ultimately didn't really matter, right? Like especially once the game started getting into that script of like we have to start putting up some points through the air, they simply couldn't do it.
Yeah, and they made some plays early on in the game. Justin Herbert found a blown coverage
Yes, he
between
did.
Porter and Minka for that touchdown. And so you wondered how the Steelers were going to look, trying to come back in there. Second half, totally different story. And the Steelers went down 10-7 at halftime. But second half, they just blew him out of the water. You said -5 yards compared to 211, I think it was, for the Steelers. So just an incredible difference in the second half. They were running the ball well, playing great defense, dominating the time of possession. So again, right on par with the Mike Tomlin brand of football that he desires to play, and he's been able to execute that all 3 weeks now. It does make me wonder, Shayne, do you think the results would have been any different had Herbert not gotten injured and was able to stay in that game, and it's not Taylor Heineke finishing out the second half?
I think that ultimately not really, because he still would have been a little bit less, effective than he normally would be with that ankle, even if it didn't get more aggravated. And also the pass rush just kind of started to tee off, right? Like I think the quarterback matters in that situation, but I'm not sure that he would have been able to escape that pressure, because we saw that's why he got hurt, right? The pressure started to cave in on him, and he got banged up when Cam kind of landed on him in an awkward way on his ankle, and that was it for him. So I think ultimately probably the outcome doesn't change. Maybe they threaten a little bit more offensively. Maybe they don't end up with 0 yards. Obviously, I assume that wasn't probably going to be the case. But to Heineke's credit, like it's not like he was out there like playing horrendously in the second half. They just could not protect him in any way, right? So once you can't protect your quarterback and you can't run the football when you're down, you're kind of out of luck at that point, right? It's pretty much on to the next week.
Yeah, and the pass rushes, that's Pittsburgh's bread and butter. That's how they're going to beat teams up. If you get a lead late in that game, that fourth quarter is where these guys tee off on you, trying to fight back. And it normally works out in Pittsburgh favor that they're able to keep that lead, because we see the plays that TJ Watt can make, and we're seeing the plays now that Nick Herbig can make.
Yes.
But I want to jump in now, Shayne, and transition to the injury to Alex Highsmith and how this is going to impact the team. And so Highsmith went down with a groin injury. The report from Jeremy Fowler is he's going to miss multiple weeks. And I even think I saw a report from Pro Football Pro Football Talk. I think it was Pro Football Talk that said maybe 4-week injury for Alex Highsmith. You don't want him out of the lineup, regardless of what you think about Highsmith better. Is Herbig actually the one that deserves to be the starting, even though Highsmith is the guy that got paid? Both are good. You don't want to be missing one. And the answer, the reason why is really simple. You need to have a healthy rotation and you need to have depth. If one more guy gets injured, even if it's not TJ Watt, if Herbig gets injured, Steelers' pass rush efficiency is going to go down tremendously because you only have 2 true edge rushers on the entire team right now. Your third is DeMarvin Leal. He's kind of that hybrid guy.
Yeah.
Better, he probably better, honestly, as like a base 4-3 end.
Yes.
And like a true edge, outside linebacker, if you want to call it, for the Steelers. He's done some decent stuff in limited action this year. Obviously, he's going to be asked to step up into a bigger role. But how do you think the Highsmith injury is going to affect things these next several weeks without him?
I do think, even though there are people who believe that Herbig is better, and we'll get into the conversation about him a little bit later when we talk about defense and specifically how they're performing. But again, you just don't want to lose an edge rusher that got paid, and rightfully so, and is as good as Highsmith can be. Now, he's gotten off to a little bit of a slow start by his standards this season, but that's not to say that he wasn't playing well. And I think more importantly, he is more of a true like full-time edge archetype compared to a Herbig, right? Like we know what Herbig is as a fire breather off the edge. Like that was very clear as soon as he got in the game last week. But can he hold up for 60 snaps? Can he do that consistently throughout the game? We don't know because he hasn't been asked to do it. Now, I think there's a chance he can, but in run defense, he naturally just isn't going to make as many plays probably, especially as an edge setter. Now, he might knife in the backfield every so often and get a splash play because of his speed and his athleticism, but is he going to be able to hold up to being blocked on the edge as a run defender 30, 40 snaps a game, especially against a Colts offense that we know is going to try to take calculated shots with Richardson as a quarterback? He's not going to drop back 40 times. Like that's just not how they play, right? So I think it's more so about can he hold up in Alex Highsmith's role, not so much can he play well, it's just can he play that many snaps at that role?
I think that is the big question. It's what everybody wants to see at this point. Can he be that potential full-time edge rusher?
Yes.
And there were questions. Obviously, this is what made Herbig fall to the 4th round to begin with. As good as he was at Wisconsin, coming out as a very young football player, there were still questions about his size at 6'2" and barely 240 pounds at the combine. And some thought his playing weight was even smaller than that. And so when you're an undersized football player, can you hold up in an every down situation? He's going to be going up against Bernhard Raimann this week in the Colts, a good left tackle. And so I don't know if he'll be as efficient on a play-to-play basis. Let me put it that way, because when you are the guy that comes off the bench fresh and you can tee off truly in pass rush situations. I know he played like 8 run defense snaps, 8 pass rush snaps, something like that last week. But when you are fresh off the bench and you can, and that is your role, is just to tee off on 3rd downs, and he can perform really well. Then let's see what he can do in a bigger role, because he's certainly going to be asked to have a bigger role here. But I think Highsmith, right, we don't want to take anything away from this guy. Like, he's been incredible for the Steelers. He's been a top 3 player on the team, in my opinion, over the last 2 or 3 years. And so I think that he still is an integral part of this team. And look, you need more than 2 guys playing edge, even if they're not all out there at the same time. Deploy a healthy rotation, keep everybody fresh. What's going to really matter, and this is the part that we need to talk about, is how are these guys going to look in week 17 and beyond? Like, hopefully beyond is what we're talking about, so that that you can get into the playoffs and have a fresh group of rotation that you could deploy out there. So hopefully you can get back here soon. But you know, these soft tissue injuries, groin injury like this, you don't want to suffer a setback. We saw Cam was out from week 1, but got injured in week 1, was out until week 10 last year with his groin injury. This isn't that level of severity. It sounds like it could be anywhere between like 2 to 4 weeks, like 2, like at the absolute earliest. And I don't think there's any reason to rush him back on the field if the Steelers are performing well, if Herbig and Leal are making for a great combination in that role, whatever. If they're getting by, don't rush him back onto the field, because we've seen how these soft tissue injuries can come back. We saw the stuff that Minka dealt with last year, stuff Freiermuth dealt with. And so hopefully he can come back to full health, not suffer any setbacks. Another one, Shayne, that was I was really discouraged to see it. I
Yeah,
don't think
me
I've
too.
ever been so discouraged to see a 7th round pick
Yeah,
land on IR for the second time, but that's what happened to Corey Trice Jr.
yeah,
in week 3 against the Chargers. Very early in the game, the Chargers punted the ball. They had to do a repunt because of a penalty. And on that repunt, Trice pulled up lame. You could see him grab his hamstring, and then he kind of limped off to the sidelines, and that was it. His day was done. And not only that, but the Steelers have placed him on IR. It's expected that he's going to miss. He's got to miss at least 4 games, and it could be potentially more. Just depends on the severity of a hamstring injury. We saw again, Minka and Freiermuth both dealt with that last year, and it made them not quite as effective football players when they're out there either. So I don't know how this is going to impact them. Again, a lot of people will say you're overblowing all of this. This is a 7th round pick. It's a part-time player. He had like 21 snaps before this, 28 snaps, whatever it was. I think Trice, every time I see him play, and you can look at the preseason, you can look at his senior year at Purdue, or you could look at the handful of snaps he has this year. He's been really good. And I think this guy, I go back to my pre-draft grade. If this guy didn't have an injury history, I would have taken him in the 2nd round. I think he's a 2nd round football player. So I think the Steelers were getting that player again. Surprisingly, after that ACL injury, he had the interception in the end zone. He allowed 9 yards and a 22.9 passer rating through his first 2 games before getting that injury. And so I hate to see another setback for this guy. I feel for him. He obviously missed all of last year with the ACL, and that was his 2nd ACL injury. He's had ankle surgery in the past, and now going on IR with a hamstring injury. Shayne, I did write an article about it because I have a little bit of a beef here with the whole situation, and tell me if I'm wrong. Feel free to chime in and disagree with me. But for a guy whose injury history is as extensive as Corey Trice's, why are we risking him on special teams? And I know that he's like, you're 7th round, you're not that valuable, you're a dime defender, you're a part-time player, you have to play special teams. I get all of those arguments. But that's for the general player. That's for the general bottom of the roster, 50 to 53, 50 to 53rd person. This is not just that type of guy. I think that what we were seeing on defense is a guy who can play boundary corner, a guy that can play safety, a guy who just can keep his eyes on the quarterback with fluid movement skills at 6'3". And so I was really disappointed to see him used in that facet of the game. I wish they would have allocated another resource there. Terrell Edmonds was a healthy scratch. Darius Rush was a healthy scratch. You could have activated one of those guys and cut back somewhere else. Give one less hat on the defensive line or one less hat at wide receiver, whatever you want to do. But I really wish they wouldn't have put that on Trice's plate, knowing his injury history and the potential value he could offer to the defense. Like I said, I know it's early. I'm a big Corey Trice fan. I was a believer in him, and seeing how well he moved and that his athletic traits did not diminish after that ACL. I was encouraged about what we were going to get from him moving forward, and now we're going to have to wait quite a while again.
Yeah, and I think to your point about the special team situation, I think the problem with it, right, is the Steelers obviously are going to play their backups on special teams, and they're going to value special teams play from their backups. I think the problem with Trice specifically, though, outside of the injury history, right, like that's one red flag immediately about a guy playing on specials, but he is also real. Like, let's be honest about it, including your slot corner, he's your 3rd best corner.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think you want to play that guy on special teams all the time if you're that thin at corner. Really, that's just my thought too. And I think obviously a lot of people will say, well, again, like he's technically back. It's like, yes, but if you're the first guy in, if one of the outside corners goes down, I'd much rather you play at least not much special teams. Like that's just my how I would be going about it. And maybe the Steelers, once he's healthy again, will also realize that, maybe we need to let this guy just be the 3rd corner and that's it, right? Like he plays when we get him on the field, and if not, he's just one of the backups for if something happens, right? Like that might be what they do. And I saw they signed CJ Henderson today.
Yes.
Don't really care for that at all. He hasn't really shown anything, but they do need a corner, obviously, so he's at least played, I suppose. But yeah, it's disappointing, right, to see this guy go down. You hope that he can get back this season and still produce, but just it's starting to, after a while, like the stuff adds up, and it makes you wonder more and more if he can hold up over a season.
Yeah, I very much doubt it at this point. Just from everything that we've seen, he's just one of those guys, and it's unfortunate because the film is good when you're out there. I cut up all of his snaps from week 2, his week 2 performance. If you want to check those out, they're on my Twitter account. Check it out. I think that he would have offered a lot to this team moving forward. Obviously, this setback is big. I think in his absence, probably use a dose of DeMonte KZ in dime. Maybe Darius Rush gets out there. I don't know exactly what they're going to do. Could be a blend of players. I'll be interested to see if it's KZ or Edmonds that gets the hat now. I would assume it's got to be one of those guys, but primarily as that gunner role and a guy that can come in occasionally on dime defense. So we'll see what they do there. But I think the Trice loss is actually a little bit bigger than what a lot of fans realize. The coverage was so good. And I know, again, take or leave PFF grades, he had a phenomenal grade. So a 90.1 coverage grade in week 2. And I think his grade on the season so far was 86.8. Like he's just very sound. Like so go check out the all 22 film on him. But we're going to have to wait a while for him to return to the lineup again. Another injury, Shayne, that I hate to see is Jaylen Warren. He's week to week with the knee, already dealing with the hamstring that he had in the preseason. And so I wonder about Warren too. Is he the guy that's always just going to be banged up, like always bumps and bruises that are holding him back? My thought on Warren is kind of just wait at this point. Just wait until the guy is fully healthy and ready to return. I'd hate to suffer any sort of setback. Again, it all comes down to you want to make a good late season run and into the playoffs. Warren is going to be probably your most explosive running back. I mean, Cordero looks really good so far in a few carries that he has, and you're going to wear Najee down like crazy. But I think they need to do a better job distributing snaps, especially now that Warren's not going to be part of the picture potentially. I just think I would shut him down for a little bit, let him rest and recover, and then use him when it matters most.
Yeah, this is one of the more frustrating aspects of the early season for the Steelers for me, and it's the fact that Warren doesn't really play much in week 1, which again leads me to believe that he probably shouldn't have been active. Like they probably should have just let him fully rest. Week 2 gets more in the action, actually has a decent game, and then week 3 pretty quickly obviously gets banged up again. He's out for the game. I think because, and you talked about Cordero Patterson, because he has juice left. He clearly has that juice still in his legs. Like he can still play running back, especially at a backup level, if not possibly like a mid-tier starter level. Because you are getting that from him right now, there's no reason for Warren to play if he's not at least 95% of the way there, right? Like, especially because Najee just, outside of some, especially in like week 1 where he was kind of getting manhandled in the back half of games because they were just selling out against the run, he's been pretty efficient a lot of the time whenever the run blocking's been there, right? Like he's been better than I expected in this offense overall. So you're getting a lot out of him still. Patterson's playing well. You just don't need to run Warren into the ground when he's 70% healthy. So I know he's week to week. I would shut him down for at least this entire week coming up. And then maybe week 5, we can talk about getting back in the offense. But it just seems like they're kind of committed to letting him play through it if he's willing and able to.
Yeah, and week 5 is against Dallas. They've allowed 557 rushing yards, I think, in their first 3 games. So I'd love for him to be available for that game. We'll see what happens with him. All right, it's the greatest time of the year again. Football is back, and it's here till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. I love Underdog because it's easy and fast to get started and play. This is the added level of entertainment I've been looking for. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is easier than ever. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code STILLCURTAIN, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code STILLCURTAIN to claim your new customer special of a free pick and a deposit offer. Must be 18 plus, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. All right, Shayne, with that, let's talk about the Steelers Chargers. We're going to recap this game, share our notes from week 3. Let's start with the offense here. And we're going to get to a deeper dive about Justin Fields in just a second, but just share your overall thoughts about Fields' performance this week.
This was the game where he had to put the team on his back to a certain degree. And, we were wondering when and if he'd get the chance to do that, whether they want him to do that. But the run game was truly putrid in the first 3 quarters of this game. They got absolutely nothing out of the run blocking. Mm-hmm. The running backs weren't able to make plays themselves. It just wasn't working, right? So they asked Fields to move the ball down the field with his passing ability, right? He didn't even have a good day on the ground himself outside of the touchdown run. So this was the game where we got to see, okay, how much has he truly grown as a passer? And we're going to save that conversation for later on in the show. But overall, the reason we win this game, outside of the defense, obviously, kind of shutting them down the second half, is because Justin Fields has become a quarterback that you can ask to, in the drop back passing game and in the design play action game, to win you a football game if you need him to.
Yeah, and to the surprise of many, he did it without the use of his legs, other than the short rushing touchdown, which is, again, valuable. Anytime that you can run an RPO right there, 100%. And so he did all of his damage really as a pocket passer. So we'll talk about him more in just a little bit here. Let's go position by position here on the offense, Shayne. The running back group. What did you think of this room in general? I think it was kind of one of those tale of two halves type thing where first half, nothing going on. It was really in those last couple of drives they were really wearing the defense down. I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive line as well. But what did you make of the running backs in this game?
I don't really hold much against them in the first half or so of this game because watching it back as well, there just wasn't a whole lot of room. Like the Chargers defense is so much better coached than it was under Staley. You can already tell the talent level isn't that much different in my opinion. They're definitely a little bit stronger up front overall than they were, with Staley there, but they just were really well coached and disciplined in the run game in the first 3 quarters or so of this game. So, Najee obviously is a guy that doesn't always create much outside of what's blocked for him, except for once he gets into the second level and can throw a dude's head into the ground. But outside of that, I mean, he's not this super creative runner, so it kind of was a moot point for him when the blocking was bad. And Patterson didn't really get many carries going until the end of the game, but he also looked good down the stretch. So I think when we get the opportunity to wear guys down and, Zach Frazier imposes his will on the entire defense, it seems, every week since he's been starting, we can definitely run the football. It's just I think in this game it became a situation where, like I said, Fields had to kind of bail us out a little bit because the run game wasn't working. But it was, on one hand, it was nice to see him be able to do that. So I guess you kind of take your wins and losses there.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about the wide receiver group here. Shayne, Calvin Austin III, career game for him. 4 catches on 5 targets for 95 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, his play of the game was the 55-yarder caught on a post across the middle of the field. And then Austin did the rest to the house for a touchdown. This is what I've been saying with this guy. Get him the ball, allow him to work in space, because when you're a water bug with 4.3 speed, you can just outrun the defense. That's exactly what he did there. I thought it was by far his best overall performance of his career. I think last year, rookie season 2022, missed his entire year with a foot injury. Last year, he played, but again, you were at the mercy of Matt Kenny Pickett last year.
Not a lot going on.
I think he had caught like 17 of 30 targets last year.
Like
just was just a no impact player. This year, finally making his presence felt. And so sadly, it was kind of addition by subtraction when Van Jefferson had the eye injury. Unfortunate as it is, Austin was able to step up and do something. He absolutely made the most of his targets. 19 yards a target, 23 yards a catch. This is what you need to see, is somebody come up and step up outside of George Pickens. Fields gave him those opportunities, and he couldn't have cashed them in any better than what he did. So I want to ask you what you thought about Austin's performance, and is this a guy that can have any sort of sustained success moving forward, Shayne?
I think he can have sustained success moving forward. I think what you saw in this game, like you said, is they attacked open space with him as the target, where, especially on that first big play, the 25-yarder, where he had kind of like a glance route where you could tell that the defensive end was on him, and Fields saw that and just waited for him to clear it and threw it right on the money to him. Like stuff like that, where like there's open space to be had, whether because defense is bringing pressure from that side or whatever it may be. Get this guy into a position where he has the ability to catch the football and have space to run, and you're going to get big chunk plays out of it. Like that's what he's going to be good at with his skill set. Now, getting him in those positions isn't always super easy. He is a smaller player. Obviously, there's more margin for error, or less margin for error, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But with the way Fields is throwing the football right now, I'm not really that worried about that, right? Like that's not as much of a concern for me. Like you look at Fields in the past, maybe you worry about him putting the ball onto his small frame, not the way he's currently throwing the football, right? So I think finding more ways to get him in those positions that they got him in will allow him to consistently be an actual threat, opposed to just being a guy that, oh, maybe you throw him a gadget play or two a game or whatever it may be, like we've tried to do in the past. This is a legit like separator whenever he gets into space because of the speed.
Yeah, give me all the slants and drags.
Yeah, slants, drags,
muster up
crossing
here.
routes, posts, whatever.
And
you
that's
want,
the thing is,
like,
if you recognize if you are in man coverage there and you're bringing him across, it's going to be really hard to stay with Calvin Austin on a drag. And so let him use the gifts that he's good at. He is 5'7 3/4, 170 pounds. He's a really, really small. He's like a 1 percentile wide receiver in terms of size. But the explosion is wild. He's got 4.32 speed. He's got an 11.6 broad jump. You can see it once he gets the ball in his hands and on the move.
Yeah.
There have not been nearly enough opportunities for him to do that.
No,
there certainly was under Matt Canada. I hope to see a lot more coming. And it's encouraging to know, Shayne, I think just 3 games into his career with Arthur Smith, we already saw a breakout performance where he went for nearly 100 yards thanks to that 55-yarder. But I still think even if you take that away, still was a very efficient receiver. Still had some nice plays. And so definitely encouraging to see. Roman Wilson obviously was not available yet. Hope to get him back soon, because I think if you can get the 3 of those receivers on the field, I don't know how often they'll do it at the same time anyway, because they just don't run 11 personnel.
No,
but at the very least, start using some Roman Wilson as well. I think it at least offers a little bit of hope, Shayne, is what's to come. Scotty Miller had a nice play as well, too.
Yeah, and I'll talk about that play later, actually. But yeah,
I just think just watching this, and I know it's a 1-game sample, really, kind of without Van Jefferson, but I kind of like it without Van Jefferson. And that's what I got to say about that.
It's the dynamism, right? Like you don't have that whenever it's just Pickens out there, and then the combination of Jefferson and 4 tight ends, whatever else you have out there. Like it's just different, right? It's more of a threat to the defense. Defenses have to care more, regardless of his success level at the NFL so far. Austin being on the field means defenses have to know, okay, sure, like, is he probably going to beat us all the time? No, but you can't let him do it, because if you do let him beat you, it might be a touchdown. Like that's the threat level that we haven't had opposite of Pickens for a lot of the last 2 years. That's something that if Austin can continue to get open, we will have that threat level to at least open things up a little bit for Fields and for the run game.
And having that out there to me is just more valuable. If they're both going to stink at blocking anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing. Jefferson is so bad at blocking this year.
I know, and you wouldn't think so, because he's a big enough receiver, but he's bad. He's so Allen Robinson-esque to me. Like he's that type of player where for a fact he's not going to offer you anything after the catch, and everything's going to be contested, whether it's in the slot or coming from outside. And so I do think it's time to kind of turn the page on that and just bury him on the depth chart. And maybe, honestly, maybe a guy that's like a release candidate, if you need to have a guy that's like better special teams down the line. We'll see what happens with Roman Wilson. I just think he is the furthest thing from a needle mover that you could possibly have on your team. And so if you're just ranking him in terms of talent compared to the 53 guys on the roster, he's in the bottom 3, in my opinion. Like I think that he's not on a lot of NFL rosters, except for a team that has a really, really thin wide receiver room right now in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll see how the target distribution and the snap distribution goes moving forward. But I'd have to imagine that Austin cut himself a bigger piece of that pie as we move into week 4 and beyond. Shayne, let's talk about the tight ends here for a second. Darnell Washington is that guy. He is every bit that prototype Y tight end that we all hoped he could be when we watched him dominate blockers at Georgia. He looks the part, and he is paving paths. You watch some of those plays that I cut up here from week 3 on Twitter. That is what he does. He's a people mover. And Shayne, I think that he is a guy that is just so talented in terms of his size to strength ratio and everything. He can play tackle. You put enough weight on the guy. He's that strong of a tight end. Shayne, I want to ask you a question that just has no basis at all, really, and we'll never see it play out. But
that's fine.
If you could pick one between Freiermuth and Washington, who do you think is the more valuable player to the team?
Unfortunately, I think right this moment, probably Washington, because they don't really use Freiermuth often enough in the passing game. Now they did try to more in this game. I think I hesitate to call it a drop on that pass that on third down that or not. I forget if it was third down or not, but the pass that could have put them in better field goal range at the end of the first half. Like it was a pass where like most throws just don't happen there. Like you don't see a lot of second window. Like it was really a slant, but then it was farther down. It was a weird throw by Fields. It was a good throw, obviously.
It was,
but just one that I think probably Freiermuth like just isn't expecting to get, honestly. But outside of that, like they did still try to get him going. There was a penalty that called back another nice play. So I don't want to say that he's not been valuable, but Washington kind of makes up for the tackle spot being a question mark for the Steelers because they essentially, whatever side he's on, has two tackles on that side, basically, right? Where you can ask him to pretty much defend against most defensive ends that aren't like elite pass rush, or even some that are kind of elite pass rush still does okay against. It just is very unique in the NFL, right? Like we're such a move tight end, like split the guy out in the slot. Like that's what the NFL tight end position has become for the most part. So when you see a guy that is freakishly big and can still be a threat somewhat, especially in like the red zone as a pass catcher, but when he's basically another tackle out there, it's just really hard to deal with that as a defense, right? If you see this guy coming at you, normally you see a tight end coming at you, like, just blow him up and take him out of the plate. And he's going to take you to the sideline, possibly. Like, that's just kind of where we're at with him. So I would say depending on the week, especially, if we're in a normal game script, Washington probably has a bigger impact overall in the game.
Yeah, Shayne, I don't think I've ever been so pleased with a tight end that has 2 catches and 10 yards through the first 3 games. But he is so valuable as a blocker, pass protector or run blocker, both. I mean, both, he is honestly, legitimately, you can leave him in as an extra tackle, a 6th offensive lineman, or he can get to the second level with ease and just blow people up. And so very fun. And by the way, we've got a matchup against Micah Parsons coming next week. And so you might want to put that guy over where Micah is.
Might want to do that.
Just some fuel for thought there. Shayne, let's talk about the offensive line. Zach Frazier, he gets your award this week, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about this unit. What did you see from the guys collectively? What were you disappointed in? In my opinion, I'll go first, I guess, this time. I'm more than okay. If Seumalo's not ready to go yet, I'm more than okay with ending the Spencer Anderson experiment and putting Mason McCormick in at left guard. It's just me. I feel like I've seen enough through 3 games. He is not grading out well. The film absolutely matches the pedestrian grade that he has through 3 games. Just too many missed assignments, doesn't know where to be too often, and he's just not all that physically imposing. I think at least what McCormick would give you out there is just his dominant ability at times and his ferocious attitude. So I think that I would be willing to make the switch entering week 4.
Yeah, so the thing with Spencer Anderson is that he's not been so bad that he's like a true liability, right? It's more so like, again, he offers very little upside, right? There's not a whole lot of like he's not probably going to go off for a huge week as a run block or pass protector anytime soon. He might have good weeks. He might have weeks where he's better than just average, but it's unlikely he's ever going to have like a monstrous performance as a run or pass blocker. I think that McCormick, meanwhile, paired with Frazier and Daniels inside, there could be weeks where we have the best interior 3 in the NFL. Now, granted, there's 2 rookies in that equation, so it's hard to say that. But you just look at McCormick's play style and how they want to play football in Pittsburgh. There's going to be some weeks where the interior defensive lines that we play simply cannot handle those 3, right? They just aren't going to be physically capable of it. And when you get that matchup where, okay, like we are just more physical, more talented, bigger, stronger than you, there's going to be times where we have 200-yard rushing days, I think, behind those 3. I really think that's possible. And I don't see that with Anderson, right? So that's reason enough to make the switch, in my opinion. But also, we're looking for the future here, right? Like, I know the Steelers don't do that, but sometimes you can luck into them doing it by accident or doing it because they have to, right? And that's great. In this case, I think Anderson hasn't been good enough to keep McCormick off the field. I think that's why you're going to see them split reps again this week. And I think by week 5 or 6, we're probably going to be done with that, either because Seumalo is back or because McCormick is just better than Anderson, right? So I am really encouraged by that. I do hope for the future McCormick obviously is going to be the guy there, because one of Daniels or Seumalo won't be on this team as of next year, I don't think. So we'll see how that plays out. But it's been really encouraging for the interior offensive line. Obviously, Zach Frazier's been one of the best players in the sport, in my opinion, through 3 games, which is insane. I mean, I know you were a little bit lower on Tommy, not to call you out anyway, but I also kind of ended up on that train a little bit because I was just a little worried about the power profile. Could he handle, pass rushers in a power perspective? But man, as a run blocker, it's hard to do a better job than what Frazier's done through 3 games.
Yeah, you're right, Shayne. And I actually just had this conversation with somebody else too. Looking at it now, I think I was too low on Frazier. I had him 47th on my board. I thought it was a really, really good second round pick. I just didn't want him in the first round.
Right.
What he's done through 3 games though is worthy of a first round pick. Like, he's been that good. So what I couldn't have expected, Shayne, is that Frazier would be a guy who goes from Big 12 competition and somehow gets better in the NFL than he was in college. Like, he's been awesome so far. So couldn't be more pleased with that. Obviously, there's some work to do here and there, pass protection, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
As a run blocker, he gets his 11-inch mitts on you, and the play is over. He will drive you into the ground. So James Daniels having an amazing season as well so far.
Yeah.
Guy is going to get paid this
offseason. I sure hope it's by us. I
know. I would love to have it. The guard market has exploded so much. It's like, pretty crazy. Afford to do that or not? It's another reason why I think getting McCormick out there gives you a feel for what you have. Like, Anderson, in my mind, always viewed him as just a swing guy. I mean, obviously didn't have a lot tied to him in terms of draft capital as a late 7th round pick. But I think that he's that guy that you look at, say, he can play 4 or 5 positions on the offensive line if you need him to do valuable. That. Maybe not one thing particularly well. I would like to look at it this way, Shayne, and I do this for a lot of positions. Which team would your opponent rather be out there on the field? Because I can guarantee you, if you ask the Colts right now and you ask Taven Bryan and Grover Stewart, they'd rather Spencer Anderson be out there than Mason McCormick running you over with Zach Frazier next to him running people over. And so I would like to look at it in terms of, what does my opponent not want me to do? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do just that. So I think that now is the time. I know it's early. It's a 4th round pick. It's only week 4, but I would get him onto the field. I don't think we've seen anything special at all from Anderson. Not like abysmal play is going to cost you a lot, but it's what the flashes from McCormick. McCormick came in this game, interestingly, as like an overhang, like extra offensive lineman. And then Anderson got banged up and he played some left guard. And he just, those reps that he was in there, they looked a lot more physically imposing. And so I think I would do that moving forward. But yes, tip my hat to James Daniels, to Zach Frazier. Just awesome games from those guys. We talked about Broderick a lot, Shayne, these first couple of weeks here. I went back and I watched all of Broderick's snaps again. I don't think there was anything nearly as egregious this time, but it does look like it always seems to me there's a few questionable plays. Like, all right, did you know what was really going on there? Or did you take that one off because the play was running away from you, or like you didn't turn and seal like you should have there? What do you make of Broderick's week 3 performance? How would you compare it to his first 2 games?
Well, obviously, I think it was far less disastrous than week 2 in particular. Again, he's just a player and I've seen some people say already, like, if he's not the best player, then you shouldn't be playing. It doesn't matter what you spent on the first round pick. And I understand that sentiment. I do. However, right, there is a level of bad you have to be for me to feel that way with a first round pick that's a developmental tackle, because guess what? That guy has to play at some point in order to improve. And he was drafted in the first round because you expect him to be a starter. So if you don't play him over, granted, Dan Moore's been better this year than he's been in the past, which of course he would be, because, why not? It's a contract year. He's going to go get paid $12 million to be bad for someone else in a year from now, probably. But which, again, good for him. But with Broderick, you have to find out if he can play. And so far, the answer has been pretty inconclusive to bad, one of the, in that range. And I think in this game, it's closer to kind of what you need him to play at to be effective, right? He doesn't have to be a top 10 tackle in the league for this offense to be good. He just has to not be a liability, whether it's through penalties, missed assignments, you have it, whatever. Now, was there still some bad moments? Like there was a Derwin James blitz where it sure seemed like he was the guy who was supposed to handle him, didn't do it, crashed down, Fields gets blown up. Like there's still moments like that, but I think it's less egregious. And I think that at some point they have to commit to him being a right tackle, because they won't play him at left tackle. So just tell him to his face, like, listen, you're going to be the right tackle moving forward. When Fatano gets back, he's going to play left tackle. Like, that's what they probably should have done to begin with. But but they need to make a decision at some point, right? It can't continue to be like, well, he's our left tackle who doesn't play left tackle. Like, that's not a real position, Mike. I'm sorry.
Yes.
You can't have a left tackle that plays right tackle. That's not how that works. So I'm just frustrated for him still a little bit, but I'm glad that he cleaned things up a little bit in this game and was not a problem for the offense.
Yeah, Shayne, we could literally do an entire episode devoted to the tackle position. And I agree with you. I think at this point, you're going to be, so after this season, I'm assuming he's going to play all season at right tackle. I can't see any reason why they would suddenly flip-flop tackles and move. Dan Moore's not moving. And the guy, they've been very clear that he's been very clear that he can't and he doesn't want to. And so you're going to be going into year 3 of Broderick Jones. Are you really going to move him to left tackle in year 3? And then Fauatanu back at right tackle. Like I don't. At this point, it seems like Fauatanu, you were a tackle all through college, or left tackle all through college. Maybe you should just slide over there now. And Broderick, you're finally getting comfortable here. Maybe you should stay here. So we'll address that down the line. But the unfortunate thing just about Broderick's play in the first 3 games, the flashes are all there. There's no doubt that he's got flashes. Like the first true pass out of the game, he buried Joey Bosa into the turf, like way up the arc. Like what was out of frame. You couldn't even see him unless you're watching all 22 film. But then you have 3 to 5 of these really bad plays per game that can be drive killers. And that's the problem with an offensive lineman. You would rather take a guy who is less impressive on a play-to-play basis, but far more consistent, which is every other lineman in the league is far more consistent right now. Then take a guy that shows the flashes like Broderick, but if you don't have the consistency, you're not going to be a good offensive lineman. So he's got to clean some of that stuff up. Still so far behind mechanically and just where he needs to be. And so more encouraging than the disastrous performance that got him pulled from after 11 snaps and 3 penalties, but not where it needs to be. And so we'll see how Fauatanu injury impacts things here. And hopefully he can just take this as a lesson, get better throughout the year. All right, Shayne, let's move it over to the defensive side of the ball here. Players that I want to address real quick. Nick Herbig, player of the game. Hard not to give him the game ball when you get 2 strip sacks. One of them came against Rashawn Slater, and while Justin Herbert was still out there, nearly recovered his own fumble, and then gets another sack later in the game. This guy is just so impressive. Every time that he stepped foot on the field from his rookie preseason last year until now, and he just seems like he only continues to get better. I think he can be that true pass rush specialist.
Yeah, and that's kind of what our conversation earlier was about, where we know he can be the third edge that comes on the field against tackles who are a little bit tired and is just too physically gifted to block, right? Like that's pretty much what happened to Slater in that moment, where it's like he just could not get out there to deal with him. And, that's one of the things with Slater, though, admittedly, where like he is unbelievably technically gifted and fundamentally sound, but he's not the most elite of elite athletes, right, at the tackle position. He's not the biggest or longest guy, right? So if you can get the edge on him, he can't always do anything about it, right? That's where with Herbig, what you're getting from him there, but can you get more? Can he provide you 40, 50 snaps as an edge rusher in a full-time game? Can he set a hard edge against the run and actually not get blown up or beaten up on the edge there, right? And maybe what they'll do is Leal will handle some early down reps. Maybe they'll do some stuff with that to kind of protect him. And then maybe that point doesn't have to be as big of a deal. But he is going to have to play by far the most snaps of his career this next game, I imagine. And probably for the next, like you said, month or so, he's going to have to do that. So I'm very curious to see how effective he is on a down-to-down basis during this time, because I think that tells us whether or not he should really be on the field no matter what, even if Highsmith is healthy. Do they have to find 3 edge packages? Do they have to figure out a way to get this guy on the field? I already think that's the case, but he might force their hand finally, right, if he plays really well the next month or so.
Yeah, I know. And I think that he's got an opportunity right now to show the Steelers how valuable he is to this team. So I'll be interested to see what happens there. Cameron Hayward's another guy. I've been so impressed with this. I've always been impressed with Hayward. The guy gets stronger every single year. Now missed a big chunk of time with the groin injury. Wasn't quite the same player last year. Like this looks like the Cam Hayward of 2022 all of a sudden. Not going to be the same pass rusher that he was in the past. but the run defense, he is as stout as any player in the league. Like, he is Dexter Lawrence level. Like, he will two gap, he will stop you dead in your tracks. And he's done that so consistently over the first three games of the season that I've just laughed out loud at times and say, how can you do that? How do you have that much strength and leverage? And the guy just gets stronger every year. And so entirely pleased with the contract so far. I think it's everything that they could have asked for and more. Don't go checking box scores. Don't worry about that. The guy is stopping the run. He is making teams one-dimensional. And look what he did just against J.K. Dobbins this week, where they held him to 2.9 yards a carry, a guy that was averaging 10 yards a carry first 2 games of the season. You can throw the tape back on, watch the L22, and just see how dominant he's been in that regard.
With Cam, it's so great to see him do this, because as much as I was someone who was a little skeptical, just because of the age, the injury stuff,
sure.
at some point, normal human beings are supposed to wear down. Right. Like, normal people, and granted, we're not talking about normal people. We're talking about the NFL. So I guess there's an element of that. Right. But even normal NFL players, they don't get so unbelievably strong at this point in their career that you still can't do anything about them, even as their athleticism fades. Right. Like, normally at some point, you're like, all right, this guy just can't hold up anymore. He can't do this, can't do that. Cam Hayward might be the strongest player in the sport now that Aaron Donald doesn't play. And I know Donald was much smaller than him, but like, Donald was the freakiest, like, strength athlete I've ever seen. But like, he might be the strongest player in the NFL. Like, there's so many instances through 3 games of him just physically dominating offensive linemen that are almost always bigger than him too, by the way, technically, at least weight wise. Like, there's just, you can't watch him without just, like you said, laughing out loud sometimes, where he will take a offensive lineman and essentially throw him at the running back sometimes, or like, he'll just do insane looking stuff for someone who's in his mid-30s. And I think this year, at least, I think he's the best run defender in the sport through 3 games, just, full stop.
Yeah.
And again, I don't use these by any means as like the Bible, but like, it's not where I'm like, oh, this is definitely what's going on here. But PFF run defense grades for interior defensive linemen, you rarely see them get too high above 60, 65, because the way the grading scale works, where negative plays are a big deal, and there's not very many positively graded plays just because of the nature of the sport. He has almost like a 90 run defense grade through 3 games. That's just not normal. It just is, and the tape backs it up. This isn't one of those things where it's like, oh, it's just PFF saying. It lines up. It just makes no sense that a guy at this age can be so much stronger than almost everyone he plays against, to the point where you can't run at him. You legitimately just have to design your run game to where Cam Hayward can't destroy it. And that's just not normal in the NFL for a long time, but especially this year, where run offenses are blooming and everything is working for the run game. It seems like not against the Steelers.
Yeah, Shane, his ability to stack and shed is just comical at times. Just how effortless he made it. It's like he's blocking me out there. I just don't know how. Scary. I don't know how he can do it and make it look so easy. But it helps also. I think when you've got TJ over on the other side, you notice that teams just don't run to the right. They don't run to the right, because Watt's going to take on a tight end and a running back when they do, and it's going to get stopped for a 3-yard loss by a backside pursuit. And so
even when they don't block him, like when they run away from him, he's, like you said, half the time he just chases it down. Yeah. Like, you have to still commit somebody over there to at least keep him from running the play down. It's insane. His ability in pursuit as a run defender, he's also one of the highest graded run defenders at edge, because he always is, because it's the splash plays, and also because teams just don't run at him usually, so they just don't grade him very much on that part. So it's crazy.
Definitely impressed with both of those guys. And Watt has found a way to make an impact even when he's drawing those chips. You heard Tony Romo talk about it during the broadcast, how it seemed like there was an extra guy over there every single time to chip in. And when you don't, that's when you have problems. And so I know that when Watt is doubled, he's rarely going to get a pass rush win, just because of the nature of his game. He's not the quickest, fastest guy off the ball. And so his ability to beat double teams, he's not going to win at a high rate, because by the time he gets past the first guy, the quarterback, they just get the ball out historically faster than ever. But if you do leave him singled on that side, you're also in enormous trouble. So you're either devoting an extra resource to him every play, or you're in jeopardy of getting the ball stripped away from you, because that's just what Watt does. And so it's a dilemma that every team faces. So Obviously, very impressed with his play through 3 games. DPOY candidate once again, as he should be. Him and Aiden Hutchinson are leading the way, actually, with plus 250 odds, courtesy of DraftKings Sportsbook right now.
Man, Hutchinson's
entering
been
week 4.
unreal.
Hutchinson's unbelievable as well. He's going to be a really good player for a long time. Any other players on defense, Shane, that you wanted to highlight from this game?
Really, I mean, I think the entire defensive front was just really dominant overall. Like I thought Benton had another good game. I did predict on StillCurtain.com that he'd have a bigger game, but that just didn't come to pass. But I think he continues to play very well for this team, and is definitely their best interior rusher, especially with Cam starting to slow down a little bit in that regard. I think overall, like I still don't love Patrick Queen. I hate to say it. I just don't.
I mean, for the money, yeah, it's. I agree.
He'll get better over the course of the year. I really do think that. Like, it's not one of those things where I think, oh, this guy is legitimately like one of the worst players in the sport. He was much better tackler in this game. I will give him credit for that. But it just, again, it's just kind of lackluster, right? Where you want to see a little bit more for a guy that you spent money on at linebacker. Because nowadays, like, you get average linebacker play and you're like, sure, awesome, but you don't want to pay $13-14 million for average linebacker play. You know, if you're going to spend that money, you want a little bit above average linebacker play. Haven't gotten it so far, but again, I think it won't be a huge problem.
Yeah, you need a needle mover for that kind of money. You really do. And so that was my question from the beginning: is it going to be worth this contract, knowing that it's a linebacker? Now, you didn't have to spend a draft capital or that sort of resource on there. Apart from getting Peyton Wilson, which I love, you can't pass that pickup.
No, that's a
and I've been impressed with him. But the thing is with Queen, at the very least, and I'm trying to look on the positives here, at the very least, what he's giving you is far more aggressive play than you got out of Devin Bush and Miles Jack and those guys who came through the building here and would wait for the play to come to them. At least he's attacking the play, even though he's missed quite often in his first 3 games. I'd like to see that. It's better for the defense because then it helps everybody just collapse on the play. So even if he's the one not making the play all the time, it does help create some things for the defense, but we do need to see him close that gap more often. Shane, I'm going to brush over special teams since we're already at a long show here.
Yeah, we're good.
Corliss Waitman's still playing pretty well. Chris Boswell is good. Right.
Yeah, Chris Boswell
special teams
remains good. Yeah, as we all.
Shane, do you have any questions for us before we get to Justin Fields here?
We have a plenty of comments throughout the show, but I think recently we had this one's kind of funny. Of course, our Barley 18, our friend here. It's sad, but Frazier should be Offensive Rookie of the Year talks, but with the NFL is hard on for casuals and excitement junkies, it won't ever happen. I think that's fair. I think that especially when you see, I will say Malik Neighbors for the Giants and Marvin Harris, like the receivers are playing great. I will give them that. Rookies, Daniels has had an unbelievable game against the Bengals, so like he's definitely in the running. Williams will continue to get a little bit better, but I think that offense is just not very good, not well coached, so he might be out of it eventually. But I do agree he's been the best rookie from a compared to his peers standpoint. I don't think an offensive line will ever win the award unless, they outlaw quarterbacks at some point, which I'm going to go ahead and assume that's not going to happen. But I agree though. I think he's
normally it should be a quarterback or receiver because they do make the biggest
impact
immediately.
Right.
But I get what you're saying for sure. Offensive linemen might be better and more consistent overall players than these other guys.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at some of the odds just right now, see how low they are. Like Talisi Fuaga plus 25,000.
And he's been really good.
Joe Milton has better odds. Joe Milton has better odds to be the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah.
He's a 3rd string quarterback for the Patriots. So it shows you how low people would vote for an offensive lineman to win an offensive rookie. It's just never going to happen. So unfortunately, but I agree. Guys up front matter. The trenches matter for sure.
They really do.
All right, Shane, let's talk about Justin Fields here. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Still Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Still Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. I think we're over 900 subscribers now. Help us get to 1,000, please. And we'd love to keep bringing you this content every single week as much as we can. All right, Shane, Justin Fields, how good has he been and how good is he going to be? These are the questions that everybody wants to see answered. And I want to ask you, through the first 3 games of the season so far, what did you make of his overall performance? If you had to give him a letter grade through, I know it's just a 3-game sample. He's with a new team. He's with a new scheme. What would you give him in terms of a letter grade through 3 games?
I'm willing to go as high as a B plus, especially when
Okay.
you factor in what we saw of Justin Fields before this season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have some stats I can pull up, some things that I think matter when it comes to talking about quarterbacks and their transition to being one type of player to another. And I'll get to those in a minute. But overall, like, he's been far better of a game manager, of a winning quarterback. People talk about quarterback wins, not a good thing to talk about, not how you want to judge quarterbacks,
Mm-hmm.
but there is an element of playing winning football, right? There's an element
Yeah.
of, are you going to actively hurt your team more than you help your team, or vice versa? So far, Justin Fields has certainly helped his team far more than he's hurt them. In fact, I do think the Chargers game is a game that you can say, if he didn't play the way he did, especially if Herbert doesn't get hurt, we probably lose that game. The run game wasn't working, all this stuff. It's just
Mm-hmm.
he had to step up and be a true passer of the football. And he did it in a way that we just often didn't see with the Bears. And you're starting to wonder, at least I am, how much of it truly was Fields just not being able to do it, and how much of it was Chicago not being able to put a team in front of him that can allow him to do so, right? And you look at some of the numbers, like his time to throw has been a big talking point throughout his career, where it's consistently above 3, usually almost mid threes in terms of seconds to throw. And that's not something you want to see. It's very hard to sustain quarterback play at that level. He's now under the 3 mark for the first time in his career through 3 games. The ability under pressure, he's been starkly worse in every facet of his game under pressure throughout his career. This season, hardly a difference in efficiency, especially compared to what has been in the
Mm-hmm.
past. Everything about playing quarterback seems easier for him. Everything about the game seems easier for him. He isn't relying on his legs, and I think he still can. And I think there'll be games where it's opened up and he has the ability to destroy teams on the ground whenever they're respecting his passing ability more. But everything about actually playing quarterback in the NFL that matters, especially in 2024, where we're seeing all these conversations about, quarterbacks aren't good. They can't beat the cover 2 because they can't just bomb down the field. They can't do this. They can't do that. Fields is beating those covers. He's doing so well at the little things that you have to be good at to play quarterback in 2024 with the way defenses are handling stuff, right? So it's been really awesome to watch. And it's another example and a long line now we're seeing of sometimes quarterbacks are not busts. They're not bad. They're not good. It's how good is their surrounding cast? Is the coaching good? And can they eventually click and understand how
Mm-hmm.
to play against NFL defenses? You're seeing with Sam Darnold, Geno Smith the past couple of years, Baker Mayfield. The list goes on recently of guys who have either gone from being truly not good to being good starters, and even decent starters going to entirely new levels. Like you saw Jared Goff over the past couple of years with the Lions, what structure means for a guy like that. With Fields, I think we're seeing that same thing, and I'm wondering more and more, is this going to continue to get even better? Can they ask him to do
Mm-hmm.
more each week? Are they going to allow him to do that? And if they do, this team, I know the points haven't been there. They're going to come if he continues to play at this level consistently.
Shayne, I agree with you. I would give him a B plus grade as well. And for a lot of things that you just mentioned there, old habits die hard, but I'm shocked at how the Steelers in Arthur Smith primarily have been able to kind of just change the way that this quarterback is, like all the risk taking. Now, risk is good. I am a proponent that risk is actually good for your offense at certain times in the game and in certain amounts. Not the level of risk though that Justin Fields was willing to throw out there in his first 3 seasons with Chicago. But he just looks like a truly different player so far in almost every way. Like I said, this game he didn't need to use his legs at all, other than the short rushing touchdown. Only had 6 rushing yards, even with that 2-yard scamper, I think it was. And so everything, the damage that he did was from the pocket. It was from play action. It was from stuff that we were not used to seeing from him. I mean, this before was a guy that worked out a shotgun. He would hold on to the ball a lot. He would make a lot of risky throws down the field. Just looks like a very different player so far. Now, I don't want to swing too far the other way, where you've got like a carburetor on this guy, just not allowing you to only go a certain miles per hour. Like you have to you got to take the training wheels off still to. We had it was Dawson, our contributor, who wrote about that. And I kind of agree. There was, you look at that, was it the first game? Second game. It was the Denver game. I think you get the 2-score lead and you just cruise from there. the game plan changes. You can tell that it's almost like Tom was in his ear saying, hey, we got this. Our defense is going to take care of business. Don't make any risky plays out there. But had you not let your foot off the gas, you wonder, could the Steelers have scored 26, 30 points in a game?
I think so.
You have to show the ability to do that. I really believe that you do. You can't go 17 games this year and not show the ability to put up a 30 points game. Like you're going to have to do it in the playoffs. The Bills are averaging 37 points a game right now through 3 games.
Yeah.
If you end up getting matched up with them or the Chiefs or whoever ends up being with a high powered offense, you're going to be in trouble. So you still have to show the ability to score. You have to show the ability to build on a lead so the team doesn't come from behind and steal it from you. But I am pleased with everything that I've seen so far in this game. 25 of 32, 245 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Oddly enough, though, the interception didn't even get credited as a turnover worthy play because it was
I agree, because it was like, it was one normally you'd expect just to be knocked to the ground, right? That not like thrown 10 feet up in
so the box score numbers could have looked better. He would have had 1 fewer interception. He would have had a passer rating over 100 had he not thrown the interception in that game. Even with that, though, still had a pass rating of 96 with the interception. Took 2 sacks. He's not taken more than 2 sacks in each of the first 3 games. So those are all the positives that you look at now. The negatives, some of the negatives, Shayne, though, is if you look at like the EPA play numbers, Justin Fields is 22nd in EPA per play. And so, but I know a lot of this, though, is a Mike Tomlin philosophy problem. It's not a Justin Fields problem. When you're not being asked to make all those extra plays down the field, and when you're the goal of the game is to play risk-free football, you're not going to look good in some of these categories. And so there is a balance between the two. You want to dial it back just a little bit. I get it from the player that he was before, so that he's not costing the Steelers games. At the same time, I think they do need to find a little bit better balance of taking those training wheels off, if you will, and letting him operate his style of football from time to time, knowing that, hey, we don't want you to turn the ball over, obviously, but we still want you to make big plays down the field. So it's finding that balance between the two. I think right now, Shayne, I would argue that they're a little bit too on the conservative side, even for an Arthur Smith offense.
And I think, like you talked about EPA, right? And that's an interesting stat to look at, because it's much more of a, like, especially when looking at quarterback EPA, it is much more a how good is your offense metric than it is how good is your quarterback metric, especially when it comes to like the average EPA, right? Because you can play really well as a quarterback, and it might be a week where your receiver drops a couple balls and you miss a couple of throws that maybe you don't normally miss, and all of a sudden your EPA per play is in the tank, right? You look at some of the plays that have been called back that he has made down the field. I wonder how much higher that EPA ranking is for him if some of those plays happen. You know what I mean? Not trying to excuse it too much, but the point is like this offense is not designed to put up numbers that EPA is going to like, right? They're not doing a lot of that type of stuff. And right now it's working because, again, the defense is historically good through 3 games, right? Like that's kind of what we're dealing with. That's not going to probably continue as we play better teams and things wear down throughout the year. We already have some injuries on defense that we talked about. But I think the ability to turn the gas on offense is clearly there, in my opinion. I think they can do that if they choose to. The problem is they're not going to most of the time unless game script calls for it. Now, do I agree with that? Of course not. I want to run up 40 points on every team they play if I can do it. However, I understand why they're doing it that way, because they don't want Fields to get into a mode of like, oh, I got to have the big play. I got to do this. I got to do that. They want it to come naturally to him. And I think it has. And that's the point, is the big plays are there. He has made some of them, just gotten unlucky with some of the penalties and other things. And I think they're designing them for him so he doesn't have to search for them, right? He doesn't have to go, okay, well, this play, I know I'm supposed to hit the crosser, come across the middle, but I have a post that maybe I can fit it into these, between these 2 safeties. He doesn't have to do that, because he can just say, okay, well, I did the good, like the little thing as well. Let me get a deep shot. Arthur, let's get something going down the field to pick. Like, he can just do that now. It doesn't have to come from improvisation or any of that stuff.
Yeah, and being too aggressive absolutely is a thing. Ask Anthony Richardson or Will Levis.
Yeah, those two are having some interesting games,
and that it will cost you. It will absolutely cost you if you make too many of those risky plays like that. So, no, I'm very pleased so far overall. And look, you should not look at just EPA. You should not look at just box score numbers.
Hard to. Yeah.
If you're evaluating a quarterback as a pie chart, essentially, the film should be the biggest slice of the pie. And then you have box score numbers, you have EPA and DVOA, and you have other advanced analytics to fill in the rest of that pie. But the eye test and what you're seeing on film, that stuff matters. And you talk about the big plays that have been wiped away already from Fields. I mean, he had the huge pass, maybe the pass of the year, honestly. The one that Broderick
one of
got
the
the
best
holding.
passes in the year.
You throw a 50-yard rope down the field right over the shoulder of Pat Surtain to George Pickens. That play was wiped away. In week 1, Pickens had I believe it was a 36-yard,
something like that. That was
36
OPI.
or 26. I know it ended in 6. Tic tac offensive pass interference that wiped away a big play. You had the passing touchdown against Denver wiped away from the Van Jefferson pick play that could have or could not have been called.
Right.
You had a pass down the field to Jefferson that should have been caught, but he drew a pass interference. You had a pass down the field to Pickens, should have been caught, drew a pass interference. Like all of these things, and quarterbacks get this kind of stuff. Like it's not unusual.
No,
every quarterback's going to get a few plays wiped away, but he's had a lot of them wiped away
early
in a short amount of time. And so that really would have inflated the box score numbers. It really would have helped his QBR and his passer rating. And so I think that when you consider those things, you understand really how well he's actually been playing these first 3 games, even if he's not putting up gaudy numbers in the box score. So definitely pleased with that. Shayne, I want to transition to the next part of the question is how good can he be? Knowing what you've seen from him, the first 3 seasons behind us, but looking at these 3 games, seeing kind of the trajectory that he has right now, how good can he be for the remainder of this year? And is this a guy that you can count on moving forward?
I think if he plays at the current level he's playing at, adding in a little bit of progression moving forward, because we've already seen some of that throughout the year, then allowing him to do more things, him getting more comfortable, I think he's firmly a top 15 quarterback in the NFL through 3 games. Now, does that mean that he's going to be able to sustain that over the full season? Not necessarily, because some guys aren't playing up to their standards and they may climb up those rankings and play closer to the top 15 or higher. But in general, like if you asked around the NFL right now who the 15 best quarterbacks are to start the season, I doubt you're going to leave many conversations without Fields' name being mentioned when you factor. And a lot of that might be the 3-0 start, obviously, but I think that matters in the case of this because the way he's doing it, right? It's not just, okay, he's 3-0. It's why are they 3-0? What has he done to help get them to that 3-0 record, right? And if he continues at the rate he played against the Chargers, it could even be a little higher than that, top 12-ish, maybe we're talking in terms of this season. Now, again, you're going to face a lot stiffer competition in the near future. You're going to have to continue to evolve your offense and allow him to do more. But the way he's playing in terms of the pacing of the game, too. I went back and watched the 3rd down reps from this game and from his last game in Chicago. It's so different. It's unbelievably different in the way that he's operating on those plays, especially. And I think obviously the gotta have it downs in the NFL is where the Steelers have struggled a lot and where a lot of teams who have that offense have struggled a lot, right? If you can't get 3rd down conversions, you can't sustain drives, your defense gets tired, the whole thing, right? That's not a problem for this offense. That's not a problem for Fields this year. And that by itself is probably going to be enough to make this defense a top 5 unit for throughout the year. It is going to make him somebody who's a top half of the league quarterback throughout the year.
Yeah, I think that if he truly is in that range, Shayne, if he's approaching like that 12 to 15 quarterback range, you can get it done with that guy. That's good enough to do it. What you couldn't do is what you had in the past. You can't have the 30th best quarterback in the league.
No.
Then it doesn't matter how good your defense is. Like you have to have a baseline. And I think that it's fair to say that Fields is reaching that baseline that you need to see from him. And so I think I would agree, Shayne. I think that he's already exceeded the expectations by this point.
For sure.
I think anybody could have had. First of all, we didn't know if he'd be even the guy on the field at this point. We all thought it was going to be Russell Wilson early in the season. Then he would maybe get his shot later on in the year. So way ahead of that bell curve. Knowing what you know now, Shayne, and knowing that Wilson had the injury, it paved the way for Fields to see the field and play as well as he has. And the Steelers get this 3-0 start entering week 4 here, chance to go 4-0. You beat the Colts this week. Would you have, if you could do it over again, would you have given him the 5th-year option?
Yes, because I think what he's going to get in the offseason, if he plays at this level the rest of the year, is a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith-esque contract, maybe even a little bit more for inflation, right? That's probably what he's looking at if he plays at the level that he's currently playing at. Now, again, 4 weeks from now, maybe he's not starting games because something happened or whatever may be the case. But I think what we've seen from him specifically is stuff that doesn't typically change and then go away. Like you don't see guys like you see guys have hot starts, you see guys have unbelievable luck or plays or whatever. This is consistent, like true quarterbacking on a level that he's never shown at the NFL level, at least in the way he's doing it, right? We've seen big stretches from him as a passer even, but not because of the reasons he's doing it with Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
I would want that 5th-year option because, one, you get another chance to make him do it again. And 2, it's going to be less expensive per year, especially for next year, than it will be if he plays at this level, right? If you want to sign him, you're probably looking at a 3-year, $115, $120 million contract if you want him for, that long, much more than the 5th-year option would have been next season. So obviously hindsight's 2020. You don't want to get a guy on the 5th-year option for 20 plus million when you don't know if he's going to be a quarterback for you, as a starter. But I feel like probably by about week 8, week 9, the Steelers are gonna be like, man, it'd probably be nice to have that right now. So, but we'll see what happens.
And Shayne, I'll be the first to admit that I was wrong here when the Steelers bypassed the deadline and did not give him the option. I said this is the right move, and the reason I said that was because the trade market fell through. I mean, you traded the guy for a 6th-round pick. Nobody wanted Justin Fields.
Nobody wanted.
Even going back to the draft, there were 3 other quarterbacks that they wanted more. 49ers were willing to trade 3 first-round picks up to go get Trey Lance instead of standing pat and taking Justin Fields. So nobody wanted him in the draft. They didn't want him they certainly didn't want him 3 years into his career, even though he was going into age 25 season. But yeah, hindsight is 2020. But looking at it now, I was wrong in saying that because I would gladly give him $25 million fully guaranteed, unmovable money for next year. Just knowing what we know for 3 games, like this is good enough for me to say yes, I would love to have you for another season, and potentially half the price that you might end up being at this rate. And so I think I would have changed my mind had I known that he was going to start the season. So we can thank Russell Wilson's calf injury for that.
I suppose. And there's an actually interesting chat about that as far as paying him or trying to do that with him. Do we really want to give him that? It's from Jay Molnar. Art Smith's scheme looks like a talent maximizer. Just recycle another low-cost talent and draft one. So this is a fun conversation about quarterbacks in the NFL because everybody, including us for a long time, especially before the Pickett situation happened, we wanted the Steelers to finally draft a quarterback that could, 1, replace Ben down the line, and 2, would just have somebody that we could actually develop, right? And we did that, and we saw how that worked out. And we see how it works out for a lot of NFL teams, right? I think the problem with the quarterback position, and if you guys listening haven't watched this or don't watch this, a great podcast is NFL SC Stock Exchange with Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers. They touched on this in their most recent episode about there's this epidemic of young quarterbacks at the college level and the NFL level having unbelievable expectations brought upon them as rookie players or even second-year players, right? Where, Caleb Williams gets drafted 1st overall. He has all this talent around him. You have to go out there and be a top 10 quarterback as a rookie, or you're going to be not good, right? They're going to consider you not good. It's a disappointment. That's just not how the sport has ever worked until recent history, right? You don't put huge expectations on rookies because they're rookies. They're usually supposed to be kind of bad a lot of the time, especially offensive ones, right? Where there's so much nuance to it. There's so many things you have to worry about as receivers even, and we've seen those take off, but quarterbacks more than anything. Drafting a quarterback it's not as simple as saying, let's just draft a quarterback to replace Justin Fields. You will not probably get quarterback play at this level from a rookie in general. Like, it just doesn't happen. CJ Stroud ruined people's minds last year, and guys before him also did a lot of that stuff. Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield, like, that's not normal stuff. It is not normal for a rookie quarterback to come in and play winning good football. It just doesn't happen a lot of the time. So even if we do want to move on from Fields in the future, if we do re-sign him, draft one in 2025 or 2026, but don't play him. Don't ask him to go out there and win games for you or play good football. It just isn't going to happen most of the time. And Arthur Smith's offense is very good at masking quarterback deficiencies typically if they're not huge. I don't think it's necessarily a talent maximizer, right? I don't think we're talking about one of the Shanahan, McVay, type of offensive coordinators here, like offensive play callers. It is more of a system that's just easy to hide your quarterback's weaknesses, opposed to completely hiding them oftentimes with like a McVay and Shanahan style. So I understand the question. I don't think that going into the season next year without Fields or someone else that you trust at quarterback and hoping a rookie can come in is not how you win football games.
Yeah, and I'd like this comment from Jay as well here. All the value is Fields costs nothing, and if we pay him, then he's producing like a 14th ranked quarterback. You're losing the surplus value. I 100% get that argument. However, you have to look at the situation that you're in, and you have to look at what are the alternatives. If the alternatives, like you said, Shayne, is going to a rookie quarterback and assuming it's going to take you a few years to develop that guy and get back on top again, I'm all for finding that guy eventually, whether it's Fields, whoever. I don't necessarily believe that Fields is the franchise quarterback yet, but in the Steelers' particular situation, they might finish with the top defense in the league.
They might.
You might have the defensive player of the year on your team again. You've got Cam Hayward on his last few years. You've got TJ Watt the last few years of his prime. Maybe now is the guy to capitalize. Well, Dak got paid. I see the most recent comment. Dak did get paid, so the pool is going to get really dried up there. So I understand trying to upgrade that from Fields. If you're going to pay, and I get the argument, if you're going to pay $50 million a year, go and get a guy that's legitimately worth $50 million a year. But you have to weigh what are the actual options going to be. And if Fields gives you the best chance of making a Super Bowl run next year, like you've passed the buck so many times with Watt and Hayward. And now can you afford to do it anymore where Watt's going to be 30 plus, Hayward's going to be 36 next offseason? Like, at some point you have to capitalize on a window and say, this person gives us the best chance right now. By all means, when Watt and Hayward are done, if the defense takes a step back, whatever, and you want to blow it up at that point and go trade for a quarterback, that would make more sense to me. But I do feel like it's about windows of opportunity as well. And I think you got to capitalize when you can. Like you said, Shayne, if Fields can somehow end up being the 12th best quarterback in the league, and he can make a splash, and maybe when you get into the playoffs, he's certainly going to be able to do more than Mason Rudolph. I mean, he's got legs. Like it takes 2 40-yard runs in a playoff game or whatever to get you 2 scores, and maybe that's enough to get it done. We don't know yet. I will hold off judgment about Fields' future until we see how things play out this year. First of all, to see if he finishes the year as a starting quarterback, and to see what kind of postseason success he can bring. And that I would let that dictate what his future should be like in Pittsburgh. So that's my thoughts on that. Anything you want to add to that, Shayne?
No, and I think he mentioned the surplus value. I get it. However, that's kind of a conversation that is talked about too much, where people talk about the Steelers offseason and the quarterback acquisitions. Like, man, if you get anything out of the guys, it's good because you pay nothing. It's like but you still need them to be good. If they're the 28th best quarterback and they're the 50th most paid, does it matter because they're still the 25th best quarterback? It doesn't move the needle at all, right? Like, yeah, you didn't pay for anything, but you got nothing too. At some point, when you find good players and you find good value, they become less valuable over time because you have to pay them. Dak just got paid a lot of money. Is he a great quarterback most of the time? Yes. Will he win anything in Dallas? I don't personally think so, because now you're paying him and Lamb and you're going to have to pay part. Like, it becomes a point where, yeah, the value does supersede the talent. I don't think Fields is going to do that in one season, right? There's so much of his career has built up to a point where teams didn't want him, like you said. I don't necessarily think that some team is going to swoop in and offer him quarterback, like market money at quarterback this offseason, even if he plays well this year. But getting a guy for a 2 or 3 year deal that would allow you to maybe draft a quarterback that's a developmental guy in the 2nd round or something like that, and let him sit for the proper amount of time, learn behind a player that has learned how to play quarterback at the NFL level, seemingly. That is the strategy that I think a lot of good teams should be doing. And if they don't do that, you're risking the turnover at the position being massive, like what we had to do this offseason with Pittsburgh. So.
Yeah, and you can always do worse at quarterback. We witnessed that firsthand. I mean, you had an aging Ben Roethlisberger with no elbow and no mobility, and it was still better than the next 2 guys, the collection of Pickett and Rudolph and Trubisky. And so you can always do worse. Ask the Miami Dolphins right now, when your drop-off goes from Tua and you have one of the best offenses in the league the last several years with him, and it goes to rock bottom with your backup quarterback. But even just risking going from Fields to streaming another quarterback in free agency. You're taking an unnecessary gamble there, in my opinion. If indeed the Steelers prove to be competitive, they can win playoff games and make a run this year. you're taking an unnecessary risk by potentially taking a step backwards. If I want to cut corners, Shayne, it's not going to be at quarterback. Like
No, you should not
I'd rather
cutting corners.
overpay and get the right guy in place rather than underpay, try to cut corners at quarterback and find out like, oh, this guy just didn't do it for us. Well, we wasted another year of TJ Watt and a good defense. And so that would be my fear of doing that. Overall, Shayne, very encouraged by Justin Fields.
Yes.
Both you and I agree about that. Even if he doesn't put up gaudy numbers this year, like his stat line by the end of the season could look very mediocre. Like he could legitimately have like 19 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. But if he's operating under Mike Tomlin's game plan, he's doing the things that you need him to do, and the Steelers are winning football games, you cash your ticket into the tournament. Can Fields give you enough splash at that point to potentially do something? That's what everybody wants to see. And that'll be the deciding factor, I think, of whether or not they should throw some money at him in 2025. Absolutely. All right. Anything else you want to get to before we do our Steelers Colts preview?
Let's do our Colts preview, get people out of here. I'm sure people have other stuff to do.
Thank you all for joining us on this long show today. You know, Shayne and I can talk about Steelers.
Yeah, got some late viewers though. We're up there, so we'll have some
that's good. That's good. If you have any comments for us, drop them in here. So we'll see what we can do here in the last segment of our show. All right, Shayne, Steelers versus Colts, Week 4 preview. The Colts have been a roller coaster ride so far. Some high moments and some really bad moments as well. Anthony Richardson can't take care of the football, which should be a nice recipe for Pittsburgh's defense, you would think. But there are a few stats I wanted to share here in just a second that it's really interesting. The Steelers are favored in this game by 1.5 points is all. Road favorites, though, so meaning that this game was played at home, they'd likely be 4.5 point favorites in this contest. Is 1.5 points fair, Shayne? Like, should Steelers be favored by more against the Colts than this?
I think the problem with the betting market for a game like this is you have no idea what to expect from the Colts. Like, you legitimately just have no. I don't think that anyone sporadic. I don't think anyone could possibly give me a good, solid prediction on how the Colts are going to play in this game, right? So you factor that in with like, okay, the Steelers aren't probably going to blow teams out. Maybe the Colts have a big game on the ground. Maybe they have a big game in the air because they hit a couple of deep shots, whatever. I think it's really hard to bet this game. Like, I personally will not be betting on this game probably at all this week, just because there's too many variables, right? But I do think it's a fair line overall, just because, again, they are at home, so it does give you a little boost there naturally. And yeah, Richardson could go off for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns on 9 of 20 completions probably, and like it might look good. And then he also could throw the ball to the other team 4 times. Just really hard to figure out right now.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, right now, the Steelers lost last year against the Colts 30-13. It was not a very forgettable game, but the Steelers won 8 straight games against the Colts before that. So take it for what you will. Yeah. All right, injuries in this game. We talked about the Steelers injuries here. Is there anything notable? I don't think there really is any notable Colts injuries. Quiddy Pay, questionable. Kenny Moore, questionable.
Is Buhler expected to be back yet?
Buckner is not. No.
Okay, that's the biggest one.
Buckner went on IR.
Oh, that's right. He went on IR. So yeah, he's out for a while.
That truly is the biggest one because he is a game changer. Can completely shut down the rushing attack if he's out there. So fortunately, it's going to be some Taven Bryan. I think that's going to be a fun little matchup for the Steelers there, playing some defensive tackles, some nose tackles. So should be interesting there. So we'll brush past injuries. We talked about Steelers big injuries already early in the show. If you missed that part, you can go back and watch that. Matchups to watch here, Shayne. Anything that you want to highlight? And the one thing that I always point to, because for the Steelers' sake has such big implications on the game, is the offensive tackle of the opposing teams versus the edge rushers of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this week, the Steelers have they're going to have Nick Herbig, not Alex Highsmith, against Bernhard Raimann, the left tackle. And they're going to have TJ Watt against Braden Smith. Both good tackles for the Colts. How do you see this matchup going?
Of course, as I will most times, even last week when we were facing 2 tackles who were playing great, I'm going to naturally give the edge to the Steelers here with that matchup. But again, not by a ton. I do expect them to be able to pass protect rather well overall. That Colts offensive line has really taken a step up since the 2022 season when Matt Ryan got absolutely obliterated every week. It felt like they've really kind of settled in, and I think a lot of that has to do with coaching and getting that figured out. However, at the end of the day, you're talking about TJ Watt. You're talking about Nick Herbig, who, again, does he have a long track record yet? No. plays he's been in, though. They are spectacular. I do expect that to be a matchup that they win ultimately. And I do think Richardson, to his credit, not as much this year, in my opinion. I need to go back and watch more of him from this season. But in his rookie season and at Florida, had excellent pocket awareness and excellent pocket movement. So it's going to be really important for him to kind of be very wary of where those two are at all times, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. And he's a guy that has a tendency to hold on to the ball a little bit longer than he should sometimes as well. I think that one could favor the Steelers, even though I think the Colts have a really strong tackle pairing.
Yeah.
I'm interested in Herbig against Ryman. You get a tall tackle against a guy that can really dip that corner. Hopefully he gets a couple just rapid wins there, maybe a strip sack in this game. And it'll be fun to kind of watching a guy much smaller than Anthony Richardson pouncing on his back.
Yeah,
so
that's very funny.
Hopefully we get to see a few reps of that.
Yeah.
Another Shayne, here's a sneaky one for you. Defending Alec Pierce in the deep ball. I got a stat here for you. Right now, through 3 games, Alec Pierce's average depth of target. Yeah, got any clue what that would be?
I believe the number starts with a 3 at least, if I had to guess.
It starts with a 3.
Okay.
Almost starts with a 4.
Right.
39.67 yards per target. And he's getting 20.8% of the target share. That's a pretty good percentage. His average depth of target is 40 yards down the field. Like, Richardson loves nothing more but to chuck the ball down to this guy. And so, Shayne, the matchup that I'm so interested to see, are the Steelers going to ensure that doesn't happen by putting Joey Porter on Pierce, or are they going to put Porter on Michael Pittman to try to take him out of the game and then force Richardson into some bad decisions down the field? I do worry if Dante Jackson at all of his 5'10" frame is guarding a 6'3.5" Alec Pierce down the field, and he's not the better corner of the two for sure in terms of sticky man coverage ability. How do you want to see the Steelers deploy their cornerbacks this week?
So as far as cornerbacks, I think it does matter a little bit who they put on him. But I think, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to Anthony Richardson here, because I know that he's struggling with his accuracy to like the short intermediate level of the field. But I might legitimately park Minkah Fitzpatrick shaded towards Alec Pierce like 30 yards down the field from the snap. I might just be like, listen, I know you want to do it. Go ahead. Try to do it. And let's see if you can beat Minkah down the field. Because like that's legitimate, like that's their offense a lot of the time is, okay, let's run the ball with Richardson or with Jonathan Taylor, or throw the ball to Alec Pierce 40 yards down the field. That's a lot of their offense right now, at least the stuff that works. I would try to make him do anything but that. Like, I don't really care how you do it. I understand like playing your safety 30 yards downfield is insane to do, but I might try it sometimes because at the very least, like you won't probably have to worry about that happening. And you're going to have to make him beat you some other way. And then if he can, great. Then you bring the safeties down a little bit. But I legitimately think, because that stat is so insane. It just doesn't happen in the NFL. Like that doesn't exist. I can guarantee you, like, I don't know how to research this. I don't know if you would even be able to research it. I don't know if any players ever had that depth of target through 3 games ever. I might be willing to say that. For someone who gets actual targets, like obviously, like you get 3 targets and it's 40 yards. Like Rashid Shaheed probably did that like 3 years in a row last couple of years. But for guys who get 20% of the target share, it's crazy.
I want to see it get to 40 and stay there the rest of the season.
I do.
Like,
I want to see Alec Pierce like
40
never
yards,
catch
40 yards per target.
Ever.
So for what it's worth as well, Alec Pierce's EPA is number 1 in the NFL, 10.1 EPA per play. Second on the list is Chris Godwin, then Nico Collins, then Jaden Waddle. Like their offense is, I'm going to hit 2 70-yard plays
literally that's what
to Alec Pierce, and I'm going to have a little bit of Jonathan Taylor, and Richardson's going to run a couple big chunk plays. Like if you can take away one of those 3 elements, taking away Pierce wouldn't be bad, because I think that has some game-changing potential. Like if he gets behind you and you're off, like we saw a few miscues from Minkah early in the season. We saw the one last week between him and Joey Porter on the sideline. Herbert went through for an explosive play and a touchdown. And then we saw one in the Denver game where Minkah bit a little bit, tried to recover, and then it resulted in a big play off the flea flicker down the field. So it's the potential to beat you there as well. Shayne, is there any other matchups that you really want to have your eye on in this game?
Again, I think the interior defensive line against Jonathan Taylor and their interior defensive line is going to be really important. I got a premium matchup with Quentin Nelson and Cam Hayward, two of the stronger players in the league, so that'll be very fun. I'm assuming you'll see that matchup a couple times. But yeah, I think it's all about the run game with the Colts, right? If you can at least limit Taylor and you can limit Richardson from gashing on the ground and force Richardson to operate as a true quarterback right now, I do believe in his ability to eventually do it at a good enough level for this to be sustainable. But it certainly is not that way right now. It is so much like, all right, it's 50 yards or it's no yards. Like that's what it feels like every week. And to force him to drop back and actually try to consistently complete passes, that's how you can get this offense off the field pretty quickly often. So that's got to be the matchup you look at.
Yeah, Shayne, we're going to see how much father time is on the side of Cam Hayward here because he gets Quentin Nelson this week. He gets Tyler Smith the following week. And so some really good guards in back-to-back weeks. If he can stack those guys up, slow down the running game, I'll be very encouraged by that. He's been awesome so far. But yeah, those are the big ones. Richardson is maybe the most high variance quarterback in the NFL. Like he has the potential, to run for 80 yards and a touchdown and make 5 big plays down the field. He also has the potential to turn the ball over 3 or 4 times. And so which one are we getting in this game? If it's the latter, the Steelers are going to win with flying colors. If it's the former, then they're going to have a lot more trouble containing this guy. So we'll see which one shows up here on Sunday. So Shayne, that brings us to our game predictions. Steelers versus Colts, week 4, 1:00 kickoff on Sunday. What do you have for us and give us a score?
So I have the Steelers winning 24-17. I think that they get their highest point total of the season. I think the running game, the Colts are giving up like 200 yards a game to non-Bears teams this year. When the Bears don't even count as a running team because DeAndre Swift plays like he doesn't see straight. So not sure what that's about, that contract. But against teams that actually can run the football to some degree, they are giving up a lot of yards to those teams. And I think that Steelers are a team that, maybe not the most efficient running game all the times, but they certainly can run the football. So I think they'll control the game on the ground. I think Fields will have a couple of big plays like he has been having. And the defense will give up a big play or two to this team naturally because they're hunting for them all the time. But I think that they keep them in check enough where they can't quite make it a game down the stretch.
Yeah, this Colts defense isn't the same one that we saw the past few years.
No,
I think that the Steelers
very beat up,
will be able to exploit some matchups. They should be able to get some stuff going on the ground, setting up with play action and for some suspect corners. And so there's opportunities to be had here for sure. I have the Steelers winning this one 20-17. I do think that it's going to be somewhat of a close game here. You're playing this one on the road. It's your 3rd road game in 4 games to begin the season. And we'll just see what Richardson brings. I think it has the potential to be a bigger win discrepancy than this, but I'm calling it a field goal type game as of right now. So those are our predictions. If you guys have any, please drop them in the comment section down here. If you are with us on YouTube, we go live every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And so if you also check out Josh George's show at 1:00 or 1:30 Eastern time on Mondays. So Mondays we're live, Wednesdays we're live. Thank you for joining us all on the show. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Steel Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Steel Curtain podcast.